All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Tatiana Chapman. Got 3 letters behind my name I got last year, certified instructional trainer. So that was fun, accomplishing that through the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. Here at Health and Safety Council of Colorado, I'm the training and safety consultant. And as part of our monthly safety group program, we have different topics that we share. So, glad that you are all taking advantage of this free webinar. And then there'll be resources that are sent out after we get off the webinar, so that you can access any of the information that I share, as well as the PowerPoint. There's no secret information in here. Just some great info to really kind of take a look at what I'm sharing, and maybe this is a time for you to review what your programs and policies are in place at your place of employment, and how do you deal with those. So always looking to try to keep this interactive. So if you do have something that you would like to add to the webinar, please feel free to do that, because I think that I try to be professional and knowledgeable in my career path, but we can always learn something from the other people that are in our classes as well. Maybe processes, procedures that have worked for you, maybe challenges that you've had, and things you're trying to improve as you move forward. So that's kind of my take on this. The other thing I'd like to mention is that, again, you feel free to participate as needed. Everybody pretty much is muted, so get comfortable with that on/off mute button. And if you feel to put like you want to share yourself on camera, feel free to do that. If you are in the Pinnacle Safety Group and you would like to get credit for attending this course, please make sure that you send me your name and company name in the chat box, and then I'll make sure that that information gets transferred in-house, so that we can make sure you get credit for that. Think that's about all we need to start with, but today's topic, incident investigation. I like talking about this because really, we've got to be prepared on the front end. Nobody likes an incident. Nobody likes an accident, an incident, but we really do need to think about, if we have them, how we're going to respond to those. So, if you haven't thought about this on the forefront, here's a great time for you to assess if you have any gaps in your current process and how you might move forward to deal with those gaps. So, all right, let me just get this little box out of the way, and off we go. So our learning objectives today, which should have been clearly stated on the website when you signed up for this, but we want to understand sources of error. What is an incident? What is a near hit? What do we need to identify as a source of us to do some type of investigation? Really the importance of having an incident investigation program. And then we do want to talk about, and we'll go through, and of course I'll share those resources of how to conduct an effective investigation. And then really that emphasis should be on looking at systems, processes, and procedures, and not just saying it's Bob's fault, right? So we need to kind of move away from that idea that everything is human error, and really understand what else could it be that could be the root cause of an incident occurring. So that just takes us to the next point, which is root cause analysis. What are those processes? How do you deal with doing a root cause, and what do you do with the outcome? Because that's really important, right? Most of us don't go through a root cause analysis to just say, yep, this is why it happened. It usually comes with some corrective actions, and ensuring that you complete those corrective actions is a huge part of it, right? So we'll get to that. And then the last point, which I think we all need to understand, is how to protect your investigation. And I give you a few tips and tricks to go along with that. So as we start off, and I'm going to ask you guys when we get to incident, what you think an incident is, because I want to hear from you. I know that some of my history, I've been in oil and gas, I've been in construction. The term incident can mean a lot of different things. So I'd love to hear what you guys might have as an incident if it's not on the screen when we get there. We'll talk a little bit about near hits. Why should we investigate both? And then, of course, the other things which I mentioned on the first screen. So why do you find the root, or how do you find the root cause? How you should investigate and what should you do? So what's an incident? Well, mine starts off with basically a work-related event in which an injury or an illness or health issue comes up. Maybe it's a fatality, something could have occurred. From my past, we had different categories of incidents in our work environment. Maybe we had an injury on site. Maybe it was a motor vehicle incident. In oil and gas, we had to worry about spills. Do you have employee incidents? Do you have customer incidents / interactions? Do you have things that you categorize on a regulatory basis? Or I put customer on there twice, but customer relations. I don't know. Does anybody have anything specific that is not on this list that maybe you have listed as a type of incident based on your business? Everybody gonna be real quiet. Steve, you got something there? I can't hear you if you're talking. All right. Anyways, you all get the gist of it. So all different kinds of incidents. And doing this process, I want you to make sure that you know what you would call an incident, so that would trigger either an incident investigation, or maybe you're putting it in an incident management system, some type of software to actually track your incidents so you can track them throughout the year and hopefully use that information to prevent future incidents, right? How about a near hit? What's a near hit? Well, or a near miss. Some industries call it different things, but it's basically something that happened that could have caused serious injury or illness, but it didn't. You might also call a near miss something like a close call, or something to that effect. So a lot of different things. So let's kind of go through this scenario here of what an example of a near hit is. If you look in this photo on the screen, we've got a gentleman here working in a warehouse, and look, there just happens to be a box on the top shelf. Okay. As he's working, something happens. Maybe the box just suddenly decides to jump off the top shelf and fall. Ironically, it doesn't fall on top of him, it falls next to him, right? Had he have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, we would have called it a hit, and we would have said that was an incident because he got hurt or injured, and now we have to deal with that. But when we look at this picture and this example of a near hit, do we think, oh, phew, nothing happened, so it's no big deal, we just go on about our day? Or do we say, wow, we got lucky, somebody didn't get injured, but do we need to investigate that because we think that it's an important aspect and we need to make sure that that thing, that event that happened, doesn't happen again? So I like the way that Chris, thank you, Chris, for participating. He typed in and he said, no, if it's a near hit, we're going to investigate it. We need to figure out why that happened because we just happen to get lucky. Chris, I know you work for CDOT, you work with equipment. Have you ever seen maybe a series of near hits that were completely sourced based on a piece of equipment or a type of equipment, and then maybe you had consistent issues with that piece of equipment. I don't know.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, yeah, we had one happen with a contractor about a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
It kept shutting down, and they had a fix for it, and it was a safe fix, but there was a faster shortcut that allowed the machine to keep running. And what ended up happening was the person used this shortcut, and I mean, it ended up becoming a hit, but it was, they had put a means of making it safe until they could make a proper repair,
Gotcha.
and it still led to somebody becoming injured in that.
Okay.
Other things we've run into is um, a process, we'll say like a chip spreading machine.
Mhm.
Um, Something breaks down, or there's just there's close proximity to moving parts and materials without
Hmm.
proper guarding or anything. And
Yeah.
while nobody ever got caught in the unguarded machinery, there was that potential, and things like that. So means of investigating and through process, improving that stuff and getting it fixed.
Yeah, I think that's a great aspect. Thank you for sharing that, Chris, because one of the things that I had found when I worked in oil and gas is when we reported near hits, and we had one that was specifically related to spills, and we had a Balon valve that kept failing consistently on some of our facilities. And so by reporting these near hits, we could actually find that um, because we had a repeat failure with this one specific piece of equipment or installation of this piece, we realized we were having spills from them. And then we took it to the next step, which is how many more of these do we have out there? Because the last thing we need is to have continued spills. And so we actually took that information and then determined on a maintenance frequency at how we would replace all of them because we didn't want them all to fail. So that's just kind of an example of how, you want to look at near hits and determine, wow, could somebody get hurt? And Chris, in your example of being around machinery that's unguarded, the last thing you want to do is get somebody pulled into that type of equipment, right? Pretty scary.
Exactly. Yes.
Pretty scary. So, we need to look at this. And if you've been in safety for any amount of time, I think you've probably seen this suggestion or example of the iceberg, right? When we see the tip of the iceberg, which is just a teeny tiny part of the entire iceberg, um, if we said those are the incidents, man, we got to look at what's happening below the surface. In this example, I just put near hits on here, but if you're in safety, then you might know other terms like, are we having behavior-based incidents where people are not doing their processes safely? What other things do we put that are happening under the surface that might eventually turn into an incident? And so we have to really realize that if we're just looking at incidents, we're not doing ourselves justice. We really need to look at anything that might relate up to, or under the surface, like near hits, that could turn into an incident. So just some ideas for you um, to think about. So as we move forward in this, why do we want to investigate both? Because I think that's the big thing. If you've got, near hits could have been an incident, somebody could have got injured, or whatever else in that original list of incidents. You want to prevent additional ones from happening in the future, right? We want to identify those hazards that are out there and then eliminate them so that they don't turn into an incident. Again, as I mentioned, this can expose deficiencies in your processes. All right. Sometimes we just immediately go, well, that guy was an idiot and that's why he got hurt. But that's not always true. That's not true, right? I mean, if we don't look at wow, is our SOP correct? The way that we do this process, is that correct? Because we need to really get down to where we're looking at our systems and our processes in that way, and looking at our equipment. So investigate that. Other things that we get out of good investigations, obviously, which I don't even think is on this list, is making sure everybody else goes home safe, right? If we look at one incident, then what we're trying to do is prevent future incidents. And then ultimately that does help to save our company in workers' compensation costs and any direct result of people getting hurt. And, you know, we know that's expensive, right? It's expensive when people get hurt and then they can't show up for work, right? National Safety Council estimates on average that preventing a workplace injury can save you up to $34,000 just on that one incident. While if you have a fatality, you know that the cost goes up dramatically at that point, and that amount that's on the screen to me is astronomical. But you think about if you actually lose a member of your family, the one who is working, supporting the family, maybe with a good income, how does that affect the family, right? So we got to remember that it's not just about our workers, but it's about their family members as well. So as we move forward, we really want to look at how are we doing our investigations, right? How does this investigation process work? We got to have a plan, and that's probably the biggest thing. If we don't have a plan on the front end, we might be knee-jerk reactioning and then really not gathering all the facts that we need to gather. We really have to kind of be open-minded and not be so quick to blame. Oops, there goes my light. Hold on. You know, we really want to think about people and our company's reputation. And then lastly, part of us in safety, environmental health and safety, whatever department you want to say about that, is we love to share why incidents happened. But a part of it we have to look at, which we're talking about right now, is being discreet in our investigation process, and then actually limit the sharing of information until we really get completely through an investigation. Part of this is CYA, right? Y'all know what that means. And ensuring that we don't share information that could be then turned against us later on due to a severe incident or even death. So we'll talk about that as we get to the very end, all right? So again, it's going to be super important that if you don't have an incident investigation process at this time or a program at this time, you may think about, reviewing the information that I share and think, how can we implement this? Or have we thought of all our bases? Do we need to add anything else to our process to make sure that we are on board? So you need to identify what needs to be reported, how to deal with the incident, who's going to deal with the incident, right? When and how management should be notified, who's going to conduct the investigation, timeline for completing the investigation, and how to implement corrective actions. Now, to go along with this, I'm just going to say that, what needs to be reported and dealing with the incident, it's going to be extremely important that once you put your incident investigation program in place, that your employees know what to do and how to handle it if they have an incident. So let's not forget that once you put this program together, you then need to ensure that you're communicating it to your employees so that they can support the process of the program. How do they report the incident, to who, what's their process? If let's say at our company, when we have an incident, it's the employee's responsibility to contact their supervisor. All right, well, what if they have a supervisor that didn't answer their phone, is out of the office, or is on vacation? Then what do they do, right? Do they know what that process is? Or does everything get reported to the safety person? If so, you may have a super busy safety person. And again, it's based on your team. What does your location look like? How will you deal with that? But don't forget, once you put the program together, make sure that you share the program and the process of the program with your employees, because they're your first line of defense. They're the ones that might be getting hurt. Okay. We're going to cover the 4-step system approach. If this image looks familiar to you, it's because we're going to look at a document, and I'm going to share this with you after we get off the class. Where is it? It looks, I can't find it right now. This one. I think it's this one. Let's look real quick. Nope, that's not it. Hold on a second. I don't know where I put it. All right, I'll have to find it. It's not that one. All right, well, you guys will see it through the PowerPoint, and I will share it it's probably already attached to the email. That's why I don't have it. So, all right. So how do you deal with an incident? We're going to go through the 4-step system approach. Again, it's a system. So if an incident occurs, what are we to do about that incident or accident? First of all, I want to remind you, as you train your people, we have to understand how bad is the incident and how are we going to deal with that first. So always ensure that your employees know that if there is an incident, that before they just jump in to help somebody, they need to look and assess the scene. All right. They need to make sure that they're not going to jump into something where they're going to get injured as well. And then, of course, help any injured people on the scene, call 911 and get EMS services out there as quickly as possible. And then depending on the nature of the incident, do you need to secure the scene? When I was in oil and gas, we had a couple of times where we had some pretty bad things happen. And at that time, you have to call out everybody and anybody to ensure that we don't have looky-loos coming to a scene. So that is a big deal. You've got to have a way to ensure that if those are the types of things you have, you know that reporters are going to be on the way, news media, and everybody and anybody can be a news person right now, right? All you got to do is have a cell phone. Everybody and anybody is taking videos and pictures, right? So think about that. Also, when this incident occurs, you need to identify who were witnesses and separate the witnesses as quickly as you can, so that as you start to gather their recording of what happened prior to the incident, that they haven't somehow come together and put a story together. So what you're trying to do is gather the facts. I've had this happen in an investigation, specifically, failure to do lockout tagout and a small incident with hot work explosion occurred. And the third-party contractor that was doing the work hit it, and they did a really good job of hiding it. But interestingly enough, I had somebody in one of my trainings a year later who actually told me and confessed to me that they didn't have lockout tagout in place, and that's why the incident occurred. So the truth always finds its way out. Obviously, at that point, it was too late, and I don't think that contractor was working for us anymore. But, you really have to try to gather the facts as quickly as possible. So once you have an incident occur, you really want to get out there and begin your investigation immediately. You want to start collecting your evidence. You want to interview witnesses as soon as possible. You want to document or preserve the scene and take more photos than not enough and from several different angles, because it will make a difference on if you have to go back and refer to those photos for any of the physical evidence or anything that you may have forgotten. As you document the scene, you want witness statements. You also want to say, hey, if there was a piece of equipment, what were the procedures that went along with that piece of equipment? You might even take a look at or make sure you obtain the operator's manual for a specific piece of equipment. So all that is going to be important. I will fix this slide before I send it out so you can see all the information behind it. It looks like I have the picture in the wrong place. So focus on fact finding, right? What you definitely want to make sure that you do is that you gather all the facts. So note what the environmental conditions are for that day. Take samples. Look at the environment. Note what floor conditions look like. Draw or sketch a picture of the layout. Maybe you take a picture, have a Google map on a site or something like that, and again, take as many pictures as possible. So you want to get there as quickly as you can so that you can do that. In part of your preservation or documenting the scene, it is definitely going to be important that you have, if you've taken the time to put your process together, that maybe you have a form that you utilize to ensure that you don't forget things. So to me, these forms are just a trigger or a check sheet or a reminder so that you're gathering all of the information that you need to gather for the incident, right? All this information can help you to fill out other forms and things like that as you go along. Within this document, we also have reminders to get detailed description of the incident. So relevant information prior to that incident occurring. What were you doing? What was the job task? Who was there? Were there any other contractors there? Okay. Get descriptions from those eyewitnesses, right? Again, anything leading up to, during, and after the event. Make sure you get that list of people. And then, of course, any other description of the incident from additional employees with knowledge related to anything up and leading up to the incident. So as you look at this, you also notice that there's an important document that, based on some of my past, that's not on this list. I would want to know, is there a job safety analysis or a job hazard analysis or a pre-job safety meeting or a tailgate meeting that happened on this site prior to work being done? That would be a great piece of information to gather and then make sure that you include that into your investigation. Training records are other bits of information you want to look at. And then, of course, if you've done any kind of audits internally or reports based on the type of businesses you have, then you might want to gather that information as well, right? When you interview people, it's going to be important that you look at this list of interview tips and even think about, wow, are people trained to do this? Do we need to consider that? Do they know what to do? Do they understand that asking open-ended questions and listening to the responses will help us to get to other open-ended questions and hopefully take us down the trail to really get to why this thing happened. As you continue to ask questions or have conversation, I don't want to say that even though it's an interview and an investigation, we have to go into this without thinking we're interrogating this person. You know, we have to have some empathy and understand that when incidents occur, people are people, we all make mistakes. So how do we approach that? How do we, rest assured that we care and that we just really want to get to the root cause? So be specific, promote clarity. If you get answers that seem very vague, that's when you want to really hone in on what was that answer and how can I reword a question to potentially get a more specific answer. What we want to, if somebody's in an incident, what do you think they're worried about? If somebody got hurt or somebody is now interviewed and somebody else they were working with got hurt, what are they worried about? Everybody going to be quiet. They're probably worried, am I going to lose my job? Right? Is my coworker going to lose his job? Is this whole crew going to get blamed and it's going to be our fault? And now they're scared, so nobody wants to talk, right? So, I think it's important in safety that we really kind of create a culture of being open, honest, and forthcoming with information so we can create a safer workplace. If you train a child, from an early age that they can tell you anything, they feel safe to tell you anything, right? If you create a culture where they're always being blamed and thank you, Angie, they're always being blamed, they're always going to be in trouble, they're not going to be honest with you, they're going to lie, right? Because the last thing they want to do is continually be called the problem child or whatever. So yeah, we have to think about how we approach this and how, again, we create a culture where people understand we truly care about them and we want them to go home safe at the end of the day. All right. So as you move forward and you are analyzing the information I'm sharing with you and maybe your internal processes, we do want to make sure that we have a systematic approach, right? This really gets rid of the idea that we only investigate certain types of incidents or certain people or certain areas within our business. No, we have to have a systematic approach and ensure that we follow this system every time we have an incident that falls into that criteria. Okay. We want to make sure that we're looking at programs, like I mentioned, which is fundamentally different than just assuming that all fault lies with people. And then if we think we found something that might be the cause of the incident, we really want to look beyond that. All right. We want to know why. Okay. Was it a safety rule? Was it a procedure that wasn't followed? Was the SOP wrong? Right? How many of you have had SOPs that have been around for way too long and not updated? What other facts exist? Where they, did it happen because they were in a rush to get to the job or to get the job done? Was it lack of training? Any of those kind of things. What we're really trying to get to is the root cause and not really blaming somebody or finding fault. So what is a root cause analysis, or RCA? Popular and often used technique that helps to get to the what, why, how, and how of an incident occurring. Root cause analysis, there are many of them out there. I happen to have been trained in the Taproot root cause analysis, but there's other ones out there. Within that process, we had the training for the process, training for the software. It helped us to look at 3 basic types of causes: physical causes, human causes, organizational causes. And some, organizations might use a different RCA. There's plenty of them out there. Having a software attached to it is kind of also nice because it can make it easier to review incident information, to look at root causes across the board or across multiple incidents. Other organization might use something like the 5 whys process. That's another one that it's just part of the process, but usually kind of indicates you're asking why 5 times to get to the basic ending. So I had to put lots of whys on a screen so that it would remind us what the 5 whys are. You can always look up 5 whys, and we're going to go through an example of a forklift incident here in a minute and continue to ask why until we think we got to the root cause or the actual root of the incident. So here's just some sample questions that are going to come out in that OSHA packet that I have for you. These are questions that you want to potentially ask during your investigation or, as part of this process. And you can look at this list. I'm not going to read them all, but did job procedures or standards properly identify potential hazards of this job performance or job task? Were employees familiar with this job procedure? Was there a deviation from this procedure? Right. So these are you can see how these questions can kind of get you down a path of finding the root cause and that information that you want to get to at the end. Did they wear their proper PPE? Did they identify the proper PPE for that job task? Were they trained how to put it on properly? That's always a good one, right? Not everybody knows how to put a hard hat on correctly. Agreed? Agreed. And you'll know when you see them. They will either be tailing off the back of their head because they don't want to mess up their hair. They might not be ratcheted down, and so when they bend over, they fall off. They might be on top of a baseball cap or a hoodie, which is not proper way to wear a hard hat. So again, that piece of it, that training. So just as a reminder, as you look at the root cause analysis, it does require some persistent digging. I've been conducted root cause analysis with a group of people, and you can tell when people are new to the process versus when people have gone through a root cause analysis before, because the people that get really excited and really defensive haven't been through it before, and they don't understand that we all have to remain calm, and it takes a lot of communication and a lot of discussion to get to the root cause, right? What we don't want is conclusions out of a root cause that say, that worker was just careless, or they didn't follow safety procedures and it was their fault. No, if you get to a point where you say, if they didn't follow safety procedures, that's still why. Why didn't they follow safety procedures? Why did they not follow the SOP that they were trained on, right? I'm assuming they were trained on it, right? But again, if a procedure or safety rule was not followed, you want to ask why. Your answers could be things like production pressures play a role. Just the way a supervisor could stress how important it is to get work done on time can actually put an undue pressure on employees that you don't even think about. Next question, why were there production pressures, right? Was the procedures out of date? If so, why had the problem not been identified previously? Why had it not been addressed? Okay, that's where we get down to, if somebody didn't follow it, you see how we can get down to a completely different path by continuing to continually asking why. Right. So as we go forward, now we're going to look at this example. And if you feel like you want to comment after I give this example, then we'll move forward with that. But let's say, I'll just read this example. In a warehouse, a forklift truck driven by a newly hired worker spins out of control and crashes, destroying property and injuring a quality control supervisor. The young driver is nearly in tears. The supervisor overflows with accusations. I'm sure you can hear it. Another worker then slips in a pool of oil, injures his head. Everything is confusion. Eventually, when the mess is sorted out, safety manager will conduct an investigation. He learns that the brakes on the forklift were bad. Someone will get blamed and the brakes will get fixed. The safety manager, overwhelmed by the demands on his time, will go off to fight the next fire. Now, you can imagine, I don't think this is an extreme case. Sometimes it happens like that. You see accidents handled like this every day. How do you prevent them from being cyclical? Anybody want to jump in? They're going to be quiet. I love it. All right. So no comments, but what might be some questions that begin to get us to the root cause? Well, we'll go through those real quick. You know, as we think about what happened, you might ask, well, it was a new forklift operator. Did he have training using that specific equipment that he was operating that day, right? If the brakes went bad, did he complete a pre-startup inspection? Did he know that he could not utilize the forklift if it was unsafe? Right, good questions. Does the company have a forklift program? Right? Does this company's program include how and when maintenance is going to be completed on a forklift? What to do? As the operator, what do I do if I can't operate my forklift that day? And then, of course, the last one, does the company have a record-keeping policy in place, right? How do we train our people? What do we do with those records, etc.? Again, as we go through this, we're looking at why, 5 whys. First one, did the forklift driver have training before using the equipment? What do you think the answer is? No. Why? The answer, our company doesn't provide forklift driver training. We only hire experienced drivers. Is this an OSHA violation? Did the forklift driver complete a pre-startup inspection? No. Why? He didn't know he had to. Why didn't he know he had to? See where we're going with this? So as you continually ask why, I like it. Ed added, ask about maintenance schedule, daily inspections. Yes, 100%. Those are all great questions specific to this example. So does the company have a forklift program? No. We just take care of things when they break. That is also an OSHA violation. You got to have a process and a procedure to account for the maintenance on your equipment. And again, does the company have a record-keeping policy? No, we don't have a written policy. You know, I can't tell you how many times we've worked with companies and they don't get to that piece where we have a process to deal with this, right? We've got to have a written safety manual. We have to have processes or SOPs that back up that safety manual, and then we got to know what they are and follow them. All right. So I'm going to just say on this screen, we're going to have the same question, maybe some of the same answers, but now I really want to understand, did we ask enough questions, or are we coming up with the right corrective actions? So I just gave some examples. This might not be completely accurate. We could probably have a great discussion about that, but that will take us way beyond our 1 hour together today. So In this first one, the action item is provide operator training for all drivers to ensure competency on company specific equipment, ensure all new drivers complete as well. Right? So there's a process for, did he have training on the equipment? Did the forklift driver complete a pre-startup inspection? No, he didn't know he had to. And interestingly enough, this one could also be accomplished through the same corrective action listed above. Does the company have a program? We said no. So develop a comprehensive forklift program that covers all the details on the preventative maintenance, including operator training. And then, of course, the last one on the written policy, and that might be covered in the above action item as well. All right. Just some ideas, the outcome of our investigations and the root cause analysis, there's a goal, right? And the goal is to identify any areas of opportunity that we have for improvements so that we can prevent a similar incident occurring again. These are going to be known as corrective actions or action items. And the biggest thing we want to understand as we identify we have corrective actions and then we have to implement those corrective actions, we really have to look at what the list looks like from a specific incident and then determine, do we have low-hanging fruit? Do we have corrective action items we can get done very quickly? Do we have some that are going to take a longer amount of time? The important thing is that to prevent another incident from occurring, we don't want to delay. Okay, we want to ensure that we look at the corrective actions and get them completed as quickly as possible. Of course, in-house, you want to document this, right? You want to document that you have actually what you have done to prevent this from happening again. And also, how are you going to share the learnings with everyone who may be impacted? In this example I gave you of the forklift incident, we also may say one of the corrective actions were, once we develop this program and the training, not only is it that operator that needs to be trained, but all operators need to be brought up to speed and have hands-on training with the specific equipment they use, right? So this is continuous improvement. This is a cyclical process. And we want to ensure that we do this to prevent incidents, reduce costs in the future. All right, we're getting towards the end. We have just a couple of slides left. And I'm just going to remind you, I'm a training and safety consultant and not an attorney. But what we really want to remember, I was at a company that had a huge incident occur, and it was not, we lost a person on our site, and it was difficult and challenging and it was horrible. But based on how severe that incident was, we realized very quickly at our company that we had to understand that severity was high and we needed to protect not only our company, our people, and reduce exposure of the event while we're trying to get through the investigation, right? So you might want to make sure that as you look at this, and look at what has happened in the past. Don't forget to do that, all right? Look at maybe collecting some data that you have in-house, analyze that data and say, wow, what kind of incidents could we have that could really impact our company if we don't have a process to identify that we need to protect the investigation as we move forward. So, the reason why I bring this up is because we got to realize our legal system is weighted heavily towards disclosure. And so if a company wishes to maximize its chances of protecting its investigation and findings, then we must have a way to protect the process. It might mean that we have attorney-client privilege. that we have attorney work product doctrine or a self-critical analysis privilege. So depending on what your incidents look like, you might have to have a process at the very beginning to determine what is the potential severity of this incident and how do we need to deal with it. All right. If I go back to, our incident where we had a death occur on site, very evident that you need to bring counsel in very early to help to deal with the incident investigation. Okay. Because in some of the way that you do work with a council member, if there is work product doctrine that needs to be followed, it doesn't just take effect because you contacted your attorney. Your attorney needs to be the one to initiate at their request that this is under some type of attorney work product doctrine or attorney client privilege. Okay. So as a best practice, again, in safety, we like to share why things happened because we think we're helping other people to prevent those types of incidents, which we are. But best practice is to not share anything about your investigation process while it's occurring. And that means you don't want to talk about it outside of your organization. And within your organization, you probably don't want to start sending lots of emails back and forth if you haven't contacted your counsel. All right, because all of that can become discoverable in the process of any kind of litigation. Again, I'm not an attorney. So I just want you to consider this. I mean, maybe this is something that you've had to think about internally previously. Maybe you have an attorney that works for the business, and you may need to reach out to them as part of your process in putting your incident investigation program together. So again, I think I need to change the order of these slides, but attorney work product doctrine protects the materials prepared in anticipation of litigation, right? So that means if somebody dies, almost immediately, everything that occurs attached to that is going to be discoverable. So anything written, anything talked about, etc. Then again, the attorney-client privilege includes only communication between the attorney and the client. So you want to use that privilege, again, if it's likely to go to litigation. So, again, ideas, thoughts, concepts, procedures, processes, all of these things you definitely want to look at to ensure that you're protecting your workers and, of course, the CYA for our companies. So don't want to forget that. Does anybody have any comments? You can put them in the text box or you can unmute yourself. Hopefully this helps. I will be sending out the email with the attachments and a copy of this PowerPoint just within a few minutes, probably within the next 15 minutes. But what do you guys think? Doing all right? Okay. All right. Well, on behalf of Health and Safety Council of Colorado, I want to thank you all for your attendance. Look forward to providing additional webinar topics throughout the year. So if you have ideas for classes or concepts, check back on our website because I'll be sharing different topics throughout the year. So thank you for your kind comments. And again, once you receive this, you have my contact information and email. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, ideas, topics, challenges. Maybe you need help finding the right direction and I might know of them. So thank you so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful day out there. Be safe and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, everybody. Thank you.